The Resonance Matrix Volume 2, The Linguistic Somatic Decode Episode 1, Propaganda. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of this episode and the latest arc of the Resonance Matrix, before we even think about the words we are about to exchange, let us simply be here. Welcome to the Resonance Matrix, a mirror linguistic hypothesis series. I'm James Miller, the line of resonance. If you are listening to this, you've likely felt the vibration change. You've noticed that the world isn't just getting louder, it's getting more synthetically coherent. You've realized that the static in the air isn't just noise, it's a script. In Volume 1, we mapped the broad architecture of the matrix. We looked at the field and the mirror, but now we are moving from the macro to the atomic. We are entering Volume 2, the Linguistic Somatic Decode. Here, we treat words not as tools of communication, but as biological software, payloads designed to execute directly in your nervous system, bypassing your logic and editing your very sense of self. We begin with propaganda, not because it is the most aggressive weapon in the lexicon, but because it is the most foundational. It is the environment in which all other influence lives. Propaganda is often misunderstood as lies or political spin. In the laboratory of the Linguistic Somatic Decode, we define it differently. Propaganda is the engineering of a collective trance. It is the intentional synchronization of human biology to a single external frequency. Its primary goal is to lower your biological shield. It seeks to numb your individual internal reference and replace it with a safe signal, a narrative home where the metabolic cost of thinking for yourself is traded for the comfort of the hive mind mentality. When propaganda is successful, you don't just agree with the message. You feel a primal physiological need to belong to it. In this episode, we are going to look at the architecture of this trance. We are going to find the install screen where the collective narrative tries to overwrite your sovereign intent. We are moving beyond the what of the message and into the how of the hijack. By the end of this episode, you will understand that propaganda isn't something you hear with your ears, it's something you install and carry within. Today, we'll learn how to hit cancel on the download. This is where the environment shifts. We are moving from the preamble into the high voltage field of the trance itself. To set the frequency for propaganda, we have to describe the moment the individual dissolves into the collective, the precise second where the internal voice is drowned out by the external hum. The etymology and definition. So in the script to decode propaganda, we have to look at its DNA. The word comes from the Latin propagare, which means to set forward, to extend, or to spread. Specifically, it refers to the practice of a gardener taking a cutting from a plant and planting it in new soil to create a clone. In the 17th century, the term was codified by the Congregatio de Propaganda Fide, the Congregation for Propagating the Faith. Its original purpose was planting a specific set of beliefs into the collective soil of a population. The linguistic somatic definition. In the resonance matrix, we define propaganda as the systematic planting of a synthetic narrative into the collective nervous system to bypass individual agency. It is not just biased information, it is a cloning process. It seeks to take one master script and plant a copy of it into your mind, so that you eventually begin to think that the thought was yours to begin with. Media and online manifestations. The digital harvest propaganda today doesn't always look like a wartime poster. It is much more subtle, designed to blend into your organic noise until it is ready to execute. Here is how you see it manifesting in the modern field. The synthetic we, social media and headlines, the tactic. Using phrases like the world is watching, we all agree, or what we now know. The decode. This is an attempt to trigger your hive mind signal. By speaking as a collective we, the media creates an environment where disagreeing with the statement feels like an act of social exile. Online example. Hashtag campaigns that demand a binary stance, e.g. hashtag stand with X or hashtag no room for Y. These are designed to flatten nuance and create a digital wall where the safe signal is clearly defined. The science says, the appeal to the infallible, the tactic, prefacing every directive with an appeal to an abstract, unassailable authority. The decode. This exploits metabolic outsourcing. It tells your brain, don't bother checking the data. The high priests of the narrative have already done it for you. It invites you to stop thinking and start trusting. Media example. News segments that use experts agree not as a starting point for discussion, but as a full stop to any further questioning. The emotional pacing, viral video, and short-form content. The tactic. Using high-contrast visuals, fast cuts, and emergency blue or alert red overlays. The decode. This is a somatic hijack. The rapid pacing and sharp colors are designed to keep you in a state of low-grade sympathetic arousal. In this state, your analytical shield is down, making you much more likely to install the emotional tone of the video. Online example. Breaking news threads on social media that use urgent, siren-like emojis to maintain an acoustic and visual spike, forcing your nervous system into reaction mode rather than observation mode. The hook, the architecture of the collective trance. Let's take a moment. You can partake in this or just listen. Close your eyes and imagine a city street at 5:30 p.m. For a moment, it is just a collection of individuals. There is the smell of rain hitting hot asphalt, the distant, chaotic syncopation of traffic, and the private, messy internal monologues of 1,000 different people. This is organic noise. It is unpredictable. It is sovereign. It is the sound of humans simply existing in their own ineffable gaps. Then it happens. Every billboard in a 4-block radius flickers simultaneously. The chaotic colors of advertisements, fast food, luxury watches, and summer vacations are suddenly wiped clean. They are replaced by a single high-intensity shade of emergency blue. It is a cold, clinical hue that cuts through the evening gloom like a scalpel. In that same heartbeat, every smartphone in every pocket let out a synchronized chime, a sharp, digital trill that demands immediate attention. It isn't a melody, it's an acoustic spike. It is a sound designed to trigger the startle reflex, snapping the prefrontal cortex into a state of high alert. You look around. You see 1,000 heads bow in unison to their screens. The chaotic rhythm of the street has been replaced by a rhythmic pulse. The billboards begin to throb with a low-frequency vibration, a visual beat that matches the alert tone on the phones. Pulse, pulse. The message appears in bold, white block letters. Stay informed. Stay safe. Unity is strength. Suddenly, the air feels thicker. The rain on the asphalt doesn't matter anymore. The smell of your own coffee doesn't matter. Your internal monologue, the thought you were having about your dinner or your mortgage, is suddenly an illegal script. It feels irrelevant, noisy, and dangerous. You watch the crowd. You see the subtle, terrifying beauty of biological entrainment. The woman to your left, who was just laughing into her phone, is now standing perfectly still. Her breathing has changed. It's no longer deep or natural. It's shallow, matching the rhythmic throb of the blue billboards. You look at the man to your right. He isn't reading the screen anymore. He is simply staring at it, his pupils dilated, his face bathed in that sickly emergency light. There is a terrifying comfort beginning to bloom in your own chest. It's a safe signal. The message on the screen isn't just information. It's a vagal anchor. It tells you that if you just sync your breath to this pulse, if you just adopt this emergency blue as your own internal color, the anxiety of being an individual will vanish. The metabolic cost of being you is too high right now. The crowd is warm. The crowd is coherent. The crowd is safe. You feel a hollowness opening up in your sternum. It's an invitation. It's a vacuum waiting to be filled by the we. The billboard pulses again, and you find your foot tapping along with it. You aren't Elias or Sarah anymore. You are a node in a synchronized grid. You feel the acrid, burnt sugar taste of a cortisol spike on the back of your tongue, but you ignore it. The blue light is too bright. The pulse is too steady. The collective trance has been initiated. The individual has been edited. The safe signal has successfully installed. With the frequency established in the hook, we now move from the sensory experience into the clinical machinery. We need to understand exactly how the software installs. The cognitive hook, the logic trap of synthetic coherence, the trap of propaganda, is rarely a single lie. If it were just a lie, your brain's error correction software might stand a chance. Instead, propaganda functions as a synthetic coherence, a masterfully engineered narrative that feels true because it is structurally perfect, even if it is factually hollow. To understand why this works, we have to look at two primary vulnerabilities in the human operating system: the evolutionary exploit, the hive mind signal for 99% of human history. Being alone meant being dead. Your nervous system is hardwired to monitor the group for a safe signal. Propaganda hijacks this primal instinct. When you see the emergency blue or hear the synchronized chime, your brain doesn't ask, is this logical? It asks, is everyone else doing this? If the answer is yes, your logic center, the prefrontal cortex, is effectively placed on standby. The synthetic coherence of the group becomes your new reality because the biological cost of being the only person not in the trance feels like a threat to your survival. It is the belonging over truth trade. Metabolic outsourcing, the cognitive shortcut thinking, is the most expensive thing your body does. It consumes an immense amount of glucose and oxygen to weigh evidence, check sources, and maintain a sovereign opinion. Propaganda offers you a metabolic discount. It provides a prepackaged reality. It crushes the messy, terrifying complexity of the world into a simple, binary logic, safe or dangerous, with us or against us, unity or chaos. By adopting the propaganda script, you stop spending energy on thinking. You outsource your cognition to the screen. The relief you feel when you stop questioning isn't agreement. It's your brain finally resting in a state of low-effort compliance. The logic trap. The narrative home, the final move of the cognitive hook, is the creation of a narrative home. Propaganda gives you a role to play. It tells you that by complying, you're a protector, a hero, or responsible. This is the logic trap. It makes compliance feel like an act of virtue. Once the script is installed, any evidence to the contrary isn't just a different opinion. It is a threat to the home you've built within the trance. You don't defend the propaganda because you believe the facts. You defend it because it has become the architecture of your psychological safety. With the logic trap analyzed, we now go beneath the skin. If the cognitive hook is the software being installed, the somatic blueprint is the heat generated by the processor as it runs. Your body keeps a meticulous ledger of every interaction. Long before your mind admits you've been convinced, your nervous system has already recorded the entry. To survive the trance of propaganda, you must learn to read the biological receipts in real time. The somatic blueprint, the biological script of the trance propaganda, requires a specific physiological state to remain installed. It cannot survive in a body that is deeply grounded, breathing rhythmically, and interoceptively aware. Therefore, the goal of the propaganda frequency is to induce a synthetic ventral vagal state, a state where you feel safe, but only as long as you remain tethered to the external signal. The respiratory shift, the high rib lock, the moment the emergency blue light hits your retinas, your breathing pattern is the first thing to be edited. The pattern, your breath moves from the deep, expansive belly, diaphragmatic, to the upper chest, clavicular. It becomes shallow, rapid, and jagged. The purpose. This keeps your brain in a state of low-grade sympathetic arousal. You aren't in a full panic, but you are unmoored from your internal calm. This shallow breathing pattern makes you more suggestible. You are physically waiting for the next instruction to tell you how to exhale. The sternum collapse. The hollow heart. This is the most diagnostic sensation of propaganda. It is often described as a vacuum or a hollow feeling behind the breastbone. The sensation, a strange, echoing emptiness in the chest. It feels as if your individual heart, your personal desires, fears, and history has been temporarily voted out. The biology. This is the physical manifestation of facial contraction. To join the collective we, the individual, I must physically shrink. Your posture might slightly hunch forward, protecting the heart while surrendering the spine. You are making physical space for the synthetic frequency to occupy your center. The oral signature. The acrid tinge, we move away from the metallic taste of deception and toward the specific chemical signature of the trance. The sensation, a dry, bitter, or acrid taste at the very back of the tongue near the soft palate. It tastes like burnt sugar, old pennies. The biology. When the brain enters a state of persistent, low-level high alert, the salivary glands change the pH of your mouth. This acrid tang is the taste of cortisol and adrenaline flooding the system. It is the taste of a body that has stopped digesting its own reality and has started reacting to an external one. The visual lock, foveal overdrive propaganda, demands your total attention. It hijacks your superior colliculus, the part of the brain that directs your gaze. The sensation, tunnel vision. The peripheral world becomes blurry, grey, and unimportant. Your eyes feel locked onto the screen or the speaker. The biology. You are in foveal overdrive. This visual narrowness triggers a feedback loop to the brain, further heightening the sympathetic nervous system. In this state, you lose the ability to see the forest for the trees. You are physically incapable of noticing the contradictions in the environment, because your eyes are tethered to the safe signal. The vagal anchor, the synthetic pulse. Finally, there is the vagal anchor. If you pay close attention to your feet or your solar plexus, you will feel a rhythmic hum or throb. The sensation, a subtle, internal vibration that matches the tempo of the media, the music, or the chanting of the crowd. The biology. This is autonomic entrainment. Your vagus nerve is being pulsed by an external frequency. This creates a false sense of peace. It feels like home, but it is a synthetic home. The moment that external pulse stops, you will feel a sharp, agonizing spike of anxiety. You are no longer anchored by your own biology. You are being towed by the matrix. Note, when you feel the acrid tinge and the hollow chest at the same time, the software has successfully bypassed your defenses. At this point, truth is no longer a matter of facts. It is a matter of maintaining that vagal anchor to avoid the pain of the hollow chest. The sovereign shield. This is the manual override. We have seen the environment, the logic trap, the somatic receipt, and the near collapse of the individual in the field. Now we look at maintaining the pulse of integral safety. If propaganda is the attempt to synchronize your nervous system to an external pulse, the sovereign shield is the act of reclaiming your own internal frequency. The sovereign shield, the sensory pivot back in the terminal. Elias is on the verge of total entrainment. His heart rate is slaving to the secure horizon pulse. He is about to nod. He is about to disappear. To break a collective trance, you cannot argue with the narrative. If you try to argue with the logic of propaganda while your body is in a high rib lock, you will lose. The narrative is designed to be structurally perfect. Your brain will simply find a way to justify your compliance to stop the physiological discomfort. We must move from the synthetic to the somatic. The practice. The sensory pivot. Break the visual lock. Elias forces his eyes away from the emergency blue screen. He doesn't look at the guards or the other travelers, delective. He looks down at his own hands, or better yet, at a messy, unscripted detail on the floor, a scuff mark on the tile, a discarded gum wrapper, or the fraying thread on his sleeve. Tactile grounding. He reaches into his pocket and grips his keys, or he runs his thumb over the rough, grain-heavy paper of his notebook. He focuses entirely on the raw texture, the objective label. In his mind, he begins to describe this sensation with 100% neutrality. No emotion, no narrative. This metal is cold. It is smooth on the flat side and jagged on the edge. It has a weight. The result: by forcing the brain to process a raw, objective sensory fact that has nothing to do with the secure horizon, Elias re-engages his prefrontal cortex. He pulls the energy away from the superior colliculus, the visual hijack, and back into his executive function. The moment Elias does this, the vagal anchor snaps. The pulse in the room becomes just noise again. The hollow heart begins to fill with his own internal presence. The acrid tinge remains for a moment, a chemical residue, but he is no longer installing the script. He has reclaimed the ineffable gap. He is an individual once more. Conclusion: the first layer of the Matrix propaganda is the weather of the modern world. It is the attempt to make the collective trance feel like the only safe place to breathe. But as we have decoded today, the safe signal is a biological illusion. It is a metabolic trade-off that costs you your sovereignty. Remember, if you feel the hollow chest and the acrid tinge, you are being edited. Do not argue with the screen. Find your keys. Feel the grit of the paper. Label the coldness of the metal. Break the entrainment before the install is complete. We have explored the environment, the planting of the script. But what happens when that script isn't just a temporary trance? What happens when the synthetic coherence begins to harden and calcify? When the soil of the mind is no longer receptive to new seeds because it has turned into a fortress, we move from the fluid trance of propaganda into the rigid architecture of our next Decode, Episode 2, Dogmatism, the hardening of the ground, the death of nuance. In our next episode, we look at the hardening of the ground. We will decode the somatic signature of the steel spine and the fixed gaze. We will see what happens when the narrative stops being a message and starts being a wall. The field is loud, but your internal frequency is sovereign. Thank you for walking through the first layer of Volume 2. Keep your eyes on the sensory details within and externally triggering. These are maps of guidance. The Matrix only has power where your biology permits it. We'll meet again at the next frequency. Until then, thank you for joining me once more. You've been listening to the Resonance Matrix, a mirror linguistic hypothesis series. I'm James Miller.